say by Liberal appointees. I thought Mr. Erskine-Smith had more integrity than that, than to worry, not be worried about $400
Point of order. Like, what is this
stolen
absolute?
affairs.
This is absolute.
Whoa, whoa,
Come
whoa.
on.
Okay,
come on,
all right.
Come on. My integrity.
Let's. What? Okay, all right, all right. Mr. Perkins, I'm going to ask you to get back on topic. I'm going to ask Mr. Erskine-Smith. I understand your irritation. First of all, your language. I'm going to ask you to retract your language.
I'll retract when he retracts. He impugned my integrity, deeply unparliamentary.
All right, Mr.
And we can both retract, Chair.
He's a dick.
That crazy MP that's freaking out, losing his cool, that's Nathaniel Erskine-Smith. He's an issue. He's with the Liberal Party, and right here he's throwing another hissy fit because he didn't get invited back into the cabinet. I wonder why. Nate, it's probably because you're a dick. Could be that. Anyhow, we've got David Cochrane, our favorite bald lady, like giving him a shoulder rub, trying to make Erskine-Smith feel a little bit better about being a loser. These Liberals, man, they're hard to watch. David Cochrane's hard to watch, but it's kind of funny. And then we're going to flip it around and have KYLE SEEBACK on here. He's another Ontario MP, but a Conservative, and we're going to see how David Cochrane treats him. It's completely different. It's so obnoxious. Let's take a look. Let's get into it. Here we go.
I feel like my old self again. Totally inadequate, completely insecure, paranoid, neurotic. It's a pleasure.
It's good to have you back.
And you know what else I've decided to do? I'm going to keep seeing the bald woman. What?
She's as good as anybody else.
Scalp was clean. She had a nice skull. There wasn't a lot of hair on it.
Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled his new cabinet yesterday. It includes 28 cabinet ministers plus 10 secretaries of state, and 24 of those are new faces. But that means Carney dropped 10 ministers who were part of his first cabinet, including former National Defense Minister Bill Blair and Minister of Energy and Natural Resources Jonathan Wilkinson. Our next guest is among those MPs not returning to cabinet. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith is an Ontario Liberal MP and the former Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. It's good to see you, sir. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be here.
I want to start with the social media post that you put up yesterday saying that it's impossible not to feel disrespected, and the way this all played out doesn't sit right. What do you mean by that?
Well, first, people should know, because everything gets taken out of context sometimes in politics, and I know Canadian politics is missing some of the melodrama from the U.S., so people are searching for it sometimes. But it was a bigger social media post, really, about congratulating Prime Minister Carney and the new cabinet and wishing them every success, and saying I wish the new minister well, and I especially seeing some older colleagues who have not been recognized, I think, over the years in quite the same way. It's great to see some of them around the cabinet table and congratulating colleagues old and new. And then it was a bit more of a personal reflection to say.
It would occur to me that he's getting a national spot in this legacy media to apologize for a tweet that he made that he shouldn't have posted. Like, this is so embarrassing what's going on.
Yeah, of course, frustrated. I changed my life around. I wasn't going to run again initially, and there was this opportunity to make an even bigger difference on a file that I see as the biggest challenge this country faces, apart from Canada-US, is the generational challenge of housing. And so there's an opportunity to make the biggest difference, and to be appointed in December and then reappointed in March, and to travel across the province to over 20 ridings in the election. Yeah, I mean, I think any human, I said this morning, politicians.
Yeah.
Are humans too. I think anyone's going to feel some disrespect and frustration, but look, overwhelmingly, I wish the government well, and I'm going to contribute to its success.
Were you given an explanation? I would assume that the Prime Minister gave you a call when he told you. I don't know if it was him or if it was a staff person. Were you given an explanation by Mr. Carney or anyone else why the change?
Yeah, I mean, there are many factors, obviously, that go into cabinet decision-making process, and there are no guarantees in this. I know that too. And so it was really a consequence of they had someone tap, the new minister that they were really looking forward to contributing, and thought he would be best placed in that file. And then, there are all sorts of considerations, regional, geographic, different backgrounds, and, many of us, frankly.
how many stages of denial are there?
Look in Caucus. There's lots of talented people in Caucus, and I wasn't the only one. So many talented people don't make the cut, and
you're a loser.
And lots of reasons go into it.
So I guess you were enticed to change your retirement plans. A lot of members of the caucus changed their retirement plans over the course of the last 6 months. Weren't going to run, now ran again. You were out until you were kind of talked back.
Although I joke, but David,
yeah.
I joke though. I was joking. I came back when we were in the basement.
Yes, you bought on the dip. There's no question about it, right? You were not. You can never be accused of opportunism. I would suggest on your decision.
David Cochrane is so up the liberal ass, man. It's weird to watch. Like, it's not hard to watch. It's just very strange. Like, so self-unaware. I guess he only caters to the audience that enjoys watching him. Like,
only make bad decisions. Only make bad decisions.
Well, I mean, so I guess what bad decision do you make now, right? Because you'd said you were getting ready to retire and maybe do something else, like, well, not retire, but move on from being a member of parliament.
Yeah.
Are you going to stick around even though you're not in that role that sort of was the incentive to make that difference and stay on as a federal politician?
Well, as I wrote, you never know what the future holds. But my focus right now is serving my community. I've been lucky to represent Beaches East York since 2015. I like to think I've done a decent job of it at times, and I hope to get back to standing up and serving my community in every possible way. I'm also, I haven't recorded an Uncommons podcast since before I became a minister. I'm looking forward to restarting that and engaging in deeper policy discussions. And I loved a sense of freedom before becoming a cabinet minister, and I look forward to continuing to speak my mind on behalf of my community.
It was interesting. I once referred to you on the show as a podcaster, and I got this email telling me how disrespectful I was being. I was like, I don't think he thinks it's an insult, and clearly you don't. So look, Gregor.
And on that, but just on that, like there are, the trite sort of thing is there's no bad seat in the House of Commons, but it's true, and we all want to make the biggest difference we can. I mean, that's why I was frustrated. There's a bigger difference you can make, certainly in the.
So he's just promoting his podcast here. What a weird, opportunity, I guess, for Erskine-Smith. Strange, though, that they're just allowing this to happen.
The role that I had for those 4 months, I mostly disappointed, frankly, that I don't get to continue to make a difference at the level and build on the progress you're making. But I have confidence the government will continue. I have confidence the new minister will continue in that fashion. I think we will, and we'll be judged by the results, not by individual cabinet selections in the end. But the whole point of politics is to shape ideas and to make our politics about ideas, and that's what I'm going to do.
Right. So Gregor Robertson, who is the person who was picked for the portfolio you were in, he was here last night. He's been speaking to reporters today. He said a couple of things. It's not necessarily about bringing prices down. I think he's trying to reassure people who own homes that it's not government policy to kind of collapse the value of their asset, but he wants to get more below market and non-market housing into the system and just boost supply overall. I mean, what advice would you have for Minister Robertson, and what do you make of the agenda that he sort of articulated in the last 24 hours and the policy that Mr. Carney put forward in the campaign?
Well, look, I said this in my post yesterday, too, that the housing portfolio is, of course, more than one person, and many people contributed to our ambitious housing platform. And I have every confidence that, he had a huge role to play in contributing to that. And at the end of the day, we have to control what we can control. And that's not home prices. That is making sure we remove all barriers to unleash the market. It's to make sure that we double down on efforts to build up community housing, because we walked away from that there was a bipartisan neglect over decades on that front. And we've got to double down on our recent efforts in that regard. And we've got to make sure we address chronic homelessness and we treat housing as a home first and investment second. There are lots of things we need to do. And look, I'm going to be someone who's going to support the government in the course of this file. Look, I can have a personal frustration, but housing and that generational challenge needs to be solved, and we need to do everything we can to solve it. And I want to contribute in a positive way.
Right. So you said you don't know what the future holds, or words to that effect. You had in the past sought the Ontario Liberal leadership running against Bonnie Crombie. She had a mixed result in the last election, I would say, getting back to party status, but not winning her seat. Is that in the cards, if that job were to come open again? Is that something you still have on your potential to-do list, sir?
I mean, there will be a leadership review in the fall, and who knows what the results of that will be. And, Columbia said that she wants to stay, and she'll, be able to put herself up, and the members will judge. And look, from there, of course, at the end of the day, who joins politics for any other reason other than to make the biggest difference they can? And there's a huge opportunity to make a difference at the provincial level, but it remains to be seen. Who knows? Who knows? At the moment, to be honest, what I'm focused on is getting to my 5-year-old
former cabinet minister. I don't like this guy at all.
Baseball game tonight, getting to my 8-year-old's baseball game next week, and being a good coach.
Right. Okay. And so, but in the short term, just to put that last little bit of context around your tweet thread, because I'm not trying to create U.S. drama here, right? I want to make sure, there's no resignation, there's no sitting as an independent, there's no leaving the Liberal caucus.
No.
It's personal frustration, but you're going to be the team player you were to, like your 5 and your 8-year-old boys in baseball. You want to be the team player you were beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, look, there are people who accuse me of not being a team player as a member of parliament when I would speak my mind and disagree with the government. I like to think I always did so in a respectful way and made our politics about ideas and pushed the government to be the best version of itself. And everyone's got a different role to play. Whether they're in cabinet, there's a particular role to play. If they're in the backbench, there's a particular role to play. If you're a Liberal member, there's a particular role to play. And I consider the role of an individual member of parliament is to push the government to be the best version of itself and in a respectful way. And that's what I'm going to do. But I hope people pause and don't take things out of context with one sentence out of an overall statement. I mean, to be generous here, I mean, that overall statement I hope was positive. And just note for certain colleagues, I mean, there are great people around the cabinet table. I mean, my riding neighbor Julie de Bruzen is going to be an excellent minister of the environment, and we should hold on to those good stories, I think.
Okay. Well, look, this is why we wanted to have you on, because we wanted the context and we wanted the explanation. We appreciate it. Nate Erskine.
I'm sorry I didn't provide the soap opera that you were maybe hoping for. I don't know. But look, I wish the government every success.
Matt, good conversation and clarity. That's what I want on this show. So thanks for doing that, sir. We appreciate it. It's Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, who's got to get to baseball. Thank you, sir, for taking the time.
He's a dick.
Now we're going to flip it around and we're going to watch this video with Seback. KYLE Seeback is MP from Ontario, and I've been told by some friends, shout out Sheila Hall, what's up, that he's great. So let's flip into this and notice how differently David Cochrane acts towards a conservative rather than a strung out Liberal like Nathaniel Erskine-Smith there, who's a bum, as far as politicians go. Let's take a look at KYLE Seeback. Here we go.
Now, KYLE Seeback, welcome to the show. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So Mark Carney said this was a brand new government, purpose-built to meet the moment. Your leader is unconvinced. What's the concern with what we saw today?
I mean, I'm skeptical as well. If you look at sort of the core of what's been put together, it looks remarkably similar to the government under Justin Trudeau. The key ministers are all the same. And when you look at the record of the last 10 years, they're a big part and a big responsibility for that record, with housing prices, with inflation, with crime, all of these things that Canadians have been very unhappy about and were unhappy about in the election. The people that supported the policies that led to all of that now have key roles in this government. So to me, it's kind of like the Who song that we sort of call Teenage Wasteland, Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. That's kind of what it looks like to me.
Okay, so it's the Baba O'Reilly cabinet in your
Correct.
view, right?
Yes.
Well, look, I wonder, I mean, you were elected, in 2019, right? First, correct?
I was elected in 2011 originally, but I took a brief vacation.
Yes, you had a hiatus there.
Yes.
Well, so you've been under Mr. Harper, Mr. Scheer, Mr. O'Toole, and now Mr. Poilievre as leader.
That's correct.
Very different approaches under those 4 men. Mark Carney seems like a very different leader and prime minister than Justin Trudeau was. So is it not plausible that a change of that significance in that job can shift how everyone below him functions?
I mean, look, I hope for Canadians' sake that there is a change, because the last 10 years really have not been great for Canadians and for Canada in general. Whether you look at, per capita income, you look at the crime stats, you look at housing prices. I know I look at them. The average housing price in my town of Orangeville, where I live, is $750,000. So if you put just a small down payment, 10%, you got to save $75,000, and then you have a $675,000 mortgage. So this is a real problem. I have a 21-year-old son, and he wants to buy a house. It's going to be very hard for him to afford a house. And with the key ministers that brought in all of these policies, whether it was the mess in immigration, whether it is the housing accelerator that didn't accelerate anything, all of these things, nothing has really, the key ministers haven't changed. So I think it's going to be a real challenge for Mr. Carney to change the direction of the ship. But I hope for Canadians' sake, he does, because we do need change.
Right. Look, there's no question the immigration escalation created a lot of challenges. The housing accelerator may be too early to fully judge its effectiveness, right? Because I know municipalities say they like it. It is unlocking some zoning changes and could help with reducing costs by paying for some infrastructure. But I want to go back to something that Mr. Poilievre said there off the top. Am I right in understanding his words when he says, when it comes to dealing with the Canada-US, we will support them? It's almost like he's drawn a line of division between the foreign policy issues they're dealing with and the domestic challenges that kind of take it easy a bit on the Canada-US thing, but really focus the accountability function on the domestic side of things. Am I reading that approach correctly?
Well, I think what it's showing is the importance of the Canada-US relationship. I used to be the shadow minister for international trade, so I know that 70% of Canadian GDP, approximately, give or take, during the year, is based on trade, and again, approximately 70% of that is with the United States. So that's 49% of the Canadian economy is tied to trade with the United States, approximately. So that relationship, we want to be successful. And of course, if we can help make that relationship successful, that's just good for Canada. It's good for Canadians, good for Canadian workers, and something we would want to support.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, when Parliament comes back, Mr. Poilievre's not going to be there until after the by-election out in Alberta. But does that mean that becomes an issue that is not so much central to the theater of question period that happens every day? You know what I mean? In terms of like the questions about Donald Trump and the Canada-US relationship, a little bit of a backseat just to sort of not cause disruption in that foreign policy challenge? How should we view the strategy there?
Well, look, I think I don't consider criticism of things that are being done or things that haven't been done to be a problem, right? If we look at softwood lumber, right? Softwood lumber is a simmering dispute that's cost Canadians tens of thousands of jobs, is still going on. We can be supportive of the government trying to resolve it and saying they need to resolve it, but also critical that it's taken 10 years and nothing has been resolved. So I think that's the approach we're going to take with the relationship with the United States. We want to encourage the government to foster a better relationship, get these trade issues dealt with in a positive way. But if it's not happening, then I guess we will also reserve the right to be critical of that.
Right. So Mr. Poilievre has said he's going to go on sort of a listening tour, right? And sort of speak to people and do a data-driven assessment of what happened in the election, and then figure out what changes that need to be made to grow on the successes you had in this last election. But when you look at things like the carbon tax being gone, Trudeau being gone, this new cabinet today, a more economically focused prime minister, I think it's safe to say, with Mark Carney. I mean, how do you need to adjust how you approach politics as a party? Because what we heard from Mr. Poilievre today started off a little bit new, but then it went into familiar territory.
Yeah.
Is that where you keep going as a party, or do you need to evolve there?
Look, I think I never want to be the Monday morning quarterback, first of all, but we do want to look at what's happened and why we didn't win. We wanted to win. A lot of people had an expectation that we would win. But if you look at the results themselves are pretty good. If you had told me 2 years ago we'd get 41% of the vote and not be government, I would say, I don't think you know Canadian politics or what you're talking about. So 8 million people voted for us. These are good results. But there has to be improvement because we didn't win. And looking at those results, I think, is important, because if you actually look at them, really fascinating. If you look at, for example, Eastern Ontario, we had safe Conservative seats that were winning by 3,000 votes. But at the same time, we won a seat in Brampton and almost won 2 others. So there's something very interesting that's happened in this election, and part of figuring out how we take that next final step to where we are the government, we'll be figuring out exactly what that is.
I think that may be a reason why there are 3 MPs from Brampton in the cabinet or in the Secretary of State portfolio today. But I don't know what you heard at your doors, but I've spoken to people who ran for your party in the province of Ontario, that women in particular and older voters, there was a question of tone and style that they weren't comfortable with, especially when facing the external challenges of Donald Trump. So, do you think that needs to change? And with your leader out of the Commons until the by-election, Mark Carney's going to have a bit of runway to do some stuff. Are you worried about sort of them building momentum because of the dynamic in Parliament after this election?
No, I don't think so. We have a great leader who got not the result we wanted, I know that, but got a pretty good result when you look at, again, 41% of the vote, 8 million people voted for him. There are perhaps some people who decided that they did not want to support Mr. Poilievre. It's actually not what I heard at the doors the most. For me, what I heard at the doors the most was Donald Trump. That seemed to be the issue that was taking up most of the criticism that I heard at the doors. And let me tell you, I heard a lot of positive support for our leader, Mr. Poilievre, and for our platform. So I think what we're looking at here is doing a deep analysis and maybe a little bit of fine tuning. This is not a, throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of situation.
Okay, both Andrew Scheer, who will be the leader in the Parliament when it returns, and Mr. Poilievre has said there may be areas where they can support the Carney government, because even though they're at right around 170 right now, pending some recounts,
yes,
it's still a minority. Where could you cooperate with this government? Because there hasn't been a lot of signs of fertile common ground for the last number of years.
Yeah.
Where could we see working together between the Conservatives and the Liberals in the coming months?
Well, look, as I said earlier, we have a problem with, per capita GDP in Canada or the earnings that Canadians have. We've fallen far behind the United States. So if we see policies that are going to directly address that, they're going to improve the lives of Canadians, right? Bring home more paychecks, right? Improve the amount of money Canadians are taking home. So, for example, if there's some tax cuts, if we're looking at actually becoming the energy superpower that we should be, that everyone's talked about, we could look at supporting that, because we do need to unleash our natural resources. They're a huge driver of the Canadian economy. So if they're looking at ways to approve pipelines or permitting process for mines a lot faster, I think those are things we could absolutely support. If they finally decided that they wanted to do something about the revolving door of crime, where someone who commits a carjacking or another serious crime and is out on bail the next day, we would look to support that. But it'd have to be real changes, not the sort of fake ones we saw in the last Parliament.
Well, the Prime Minister said today that reducing the carbon tax to zero was his first act last time. The first thing, they got to do supply, and you've got to elect a speaker and those things, but he wants to do a tax cut effective Canada Day. Now, I know it's not the middle class tax cut your party ran on, but it is a tax cut for basically everybody. Is that something you can see your party supporting?
I could see it. You have to look at it. You don't know what the details are on
if it
those
lives
things,
up to the platform specifics.
If it lives up to what they're saying, we'd certainly take a look at that. He did say he's going to cancel the carbon tax, yes, but he also said he's going to increase the industrial carbon tax, which is a real problem. I met with the steel industry a long time ago when I was the Labour shadow minister, and they were saying if the carbon tax goes up, we will not be producing steel in Canada in 5 years. So there's also areas that are going to face sharp criticism with the plan that Mark Carney has put forward for Canadians.
There are a lot of offsets, though, and protections in the output-based pricing system and the large emitting systems for trade-exposed industries, right? So, I mean, there are ways to do this without punishing them. Helping them transition to green power production, for example, is a way to do it.
There is some aspects to that, but we are making our steel industry uncompetitive. And again, if you look at the United States, there is no output-based pricing system for American steel, and the majority of our steel that gets exported goes to the United States. So our steel producers are at a competitive disadvantage. And suggesting you're going to increase steel, or say, how much steel does the average Canadian buy, which Mr. Carney said, which I thought was a ludicrous statement, and not an understanding of how the Canadian economy works, we would have to push back vigorously on things like that.
Okay. Ontario Conservative MP KYLE Seeback, it's good to meet you. Thanks for coming in today, sir.
Thanks very much.
So that's KYLE Seeback. He's great. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, not so great. Let me know in the comments what you think about David Cochrane. Aaron, Canadian Looney, thanks for watching the video. We'll check you out next time. Later, gang.
Oh, yeah.